Hello, everybody. Welcome to afternoon coffee time. Sit down, we'll have a coffee, we'll have a talk, it'll be great. Okay. Well, so, I'm getting old. We're all getting old. Every one of us, every minute, every second, we're getting old. But, having lived in Asia and then living back over here in the West, I have to say that getting old over here, um, looks like it has the potential to be absolutely horrific. And this is inspired by a movie I was watching that every woman, I think, of middle age or older, or every woman, period, should watch with Susan Sarandon called The Meddler. And that's essentially what older women become in the nuclear family model as practiced in the West. Past a certain age, once your kids hit adulthood, generally by the time they hit teenage years, it's God, mom, go away. And then you have empty nest syndrome, and everybody thinks all of this stuff is normal, but it's not. It's a cultural norm within certain societies to kind of dispose of the elderly and dispose of older parents and grandparents. And I think that the way COVID-19 and its penetration into care homes has been handled to a large extent shows that. Um, Older people shouldn't be expendable, especially in a time where marriage is failing at a rate of what, 50 to 60%. Your kids grow up, they go away, and your marriage falls apart, and there you are with nothing and no one. And if you want to see the fallout from this, you can go to Thailand and see all of the older, primarily men, who go there and find nice young wives to start up family life 2.0 with. And I don't blame them at all. I don't blame them at all. And there's also a documentary called My Thai Bride where the guy says, love and romance and going out and all that kind of stuff is a younger man's game back in the West, in the culture from which he came. He was from England. And I think to some extent that's true, but it's not just true for men. It's true for women as well. And not to say that everybody has like an expired by date or an expiration date or a sell by date, but it is to say that um, the way society treats older people here is not anywhere near the reverence you find in some cultures. And in Asia, like, people don't treat their parents like this. Miss Thailand, dressed in her crown and her finery and her ribbons and her high heels. I actually saw a picture of her on her knees, weighing, which is, putting your hands together and then making like a prayer motion. It's a sign of respect and salutation. You do it for monks as well. But she was weighing her mother on her knees in front of trash cans that her mother had spent her life picking through to collect recyclables to put her through school and take care of her and raise her. That's how much respect and reverence you're supposed to have for older adults and parents and grandparents, almost always, unless they're fully capable of functioning on their own. The extended family lives with the family. So grandparents stay with the parents and the grandkids, and everybody lives together. There's none of this, I'm 18 now, I'm going to go off and live on my own, and then we're going to, ship grandma and grandpa to a home somewhere. None of that is acceptable. Families are very close there. Family values are serious, not just for family, but for extended family as well, and parents and grandparents. And it's so much more respectful, and just the idea, I think it goes to show, over here especially, how much like stuff has replaced connection. You go get your own apartment, you fill it with your own stuff. What's wrong with the room at your parents' house? Well, you're supposed to grow up and go out and get a house and get your own stuff. And why? So that, you can leave your parents behind. And if you're lucky enough, if you're like the 1 in 3 people that has parents that are together, leave them alone in a house by themselves to age and end up in a care home where someone will walk off and let them sit in their own feces for 3 days while they die of COVID-19. Or, I mean, you could stay there and like care for them, or somehow set up some kind of a situation where they're close by. Or I think it just goes to show like the expendability of family relations, and it's just a really disturbing trend. And I've worked in care homes before, and honestly, it doesn't surprise me that some of these people walked off and left. You know, care home residents, long-term care home residents, left them to fend for themselves. There are apparently care homes here in Quebec that had 100% COVID-19 infection rate. So, um, but you know, my big point in wanting to say all this, and this is mainly for women, like when you get older, as I'm doing, getting older. When you get older, if you are single, if you're a single parent or whatever, there is a point, and you can see it so clearly in watching this movie, which is why I wanted to talk about it, where you can end up very alone. And there's another movie, one of my favorite movies, called Requiem for a Dream, based on the book by Hubert Selby Jr., who also wrote Last Exit to Brooklyn, which you need to have a strong stomach if you're going to read that book. But Requiem for a Dream has essentially the same thing. This mother who's been like left on her own and ends up in all sorts of issues, but she's basically like lives for the television. I know a lot of elderly people, a lot of older people. I know a lot of like average middle-aged people and even younger than that are in that situation. They live for TV movies. I mean, we're all in lockdown right now, so that seems a little more normal for some people. But there are people who like that's all they have is sitting in front of a TV set to keep them company. And this crap they've spent their lives filling whatever house or apartment they live in with. And stuff does not replace human connections, folks. And that's one of the lies of consumer capitalism and living in a consumer capitalist mass-produced society. And as somebody who's worked in a care home, as someone who's spent a lot of time alone, as someone who knows intimately and extensively what loneliness looks like, I would say there's pretty much an epidemic of it. And for some reason, loneliness is like this thing that's really like shameful to admit because it seems like it maybe implies that you don't have any friends and no one likes you and whatever else. But there is actually a point, if you look at the Western nuclear family model, there's a point at which you are supposed to end up kind of lonely. I mean, now that divorce is the norm, more so than marriage is being maintained till death, the norm is that you get divorced, you raise your kids, they go off, and there you are, by yourself. What do you do with that? So, a dry cough. I'm now convinced I'm going to die of corona apocalypse. So, yeah, that's my spiel and all that. And so my whole message to women, especially of my age, I'm 43, my age and older, make sure you have something set up for yourself. Make sure that you have a fund you're saving to go travel, a place you plan, a Valhalla of your own set up that you plan to go retire someplace, something that you're going to do that's going to fill your life. Make sure that, raising the two kids you had or the one kid or whatever doesn't become all you had, because eventually that child goes away, and then where are you? So we all know the movie theater, but also real life stereotype of the annoying mother who calls 30 times a day, and you have to ignore the phone calls or let it go. I mean, it's just like society's rife with it. So don't let yourself become expendable. Once you're past your working and producing years for capitalism, and once you're past taking care and raising the kids age, don't let yourself just become expendable. I rented a room once from a woman, and this is when I really started becoming terrified about this whole thing. I've been scared of this shit for years, kind of observing, going back and forth between here and other countries, or going back between different countries of the world. I rented a room from this woman, and she was, I think, 60 or 65. And I had just turned 30 and like started losing my mind because I didn't have any of the things I thought I was gonna have. I hadn't fallen in love, I hadn't gotten married, I hadn't met the one, I hadn't done any of that shit. And so I turned 30 and I go like ballistic. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking to her one day, and she was like a very high standard, high maintenance, everything a certain way kind of person. And I was renting a room for her, there in Florida, and she was in some ways a nice person, but she was also a very bitter, high functioning alcoholic. And I remember one day just asking her, she was like 60, 65, and she's there by herself. She'd, never been married or had any kids or anything. And I was like, why didn't you ever get married? Like, why didn't you ever have a family? Why didn't you ever do any of that kind of stuff? And she looked at me and she just seriously, she didn't even look at me. She was just staring at the TV, which she always stared at because it was that and a bottle of wine until she passed out every single night. And she said, I never met anyone I thought would be a good father or husband. And that was like the first time I ever realized in life that that was actually possible. You could go your whole life and not meet like the one. And so it just sent me further spiraling into an early midlife crisis, I guess you can. Whatever. Some kind of crisis, some kind of existential crisis where I was like, oh my God, Disney's been lying to me all these years. Who knew? There's no prince out there waiting for me, no perfect guy that's going to whisk me away on a horse, or girl who's going to whisk me away on a horse necessarily. There's nobody out there who's going to save me but me. Hence all the traveling, hence all the carpe diem, hence all the YOLO and middle finger up to the world, and I'm going to do me, and everybody else can screw off, and upsetting a lot of people in the whole process of that. But I've always lived my life from the position of being in my deathbed and looking back and wanting to have no regrets. And I have like a few regrets, but not anywhere near what I'd have had I listened to other people and conformed and done what I was supposed to do as a woman and all of this other crap that we get taught. So just a heads up. Whatever it is, if it's a career, if it's travel, if it's a hobby, make sure you have some kind of personhood and life outside of being a mother and a wife or a husband and a father. Make sure you're becoming a whole person outside of doing whatever society has told you you're supposed to do. Don't end up expendable and on a trash heap somewhere. And a lot of these care homes, they cost $3,000-$4,000 a month, the nicer ones. And even if your kids can afford to put you somewhere that nice later on in life, you're still amongst strangers. And it's not like, I used to watch the Golden Girls and think, oh, that looks actually pretty cool. But it's not like that. It's like you're being looked after by people who often don't even give a shit, which I think this whole COVID-19 and care homes thing has shown us, first of all. And then second of all, sometimes the level of relationship you can even have with other residents is not very much because a lot of them are barely functional very often. So just make sure that you tend your own life while doing the things like having a family and buying a house and getting a mortgage and all the debt slavery shit that you're supposed to do. If you do all that stuff, just make sure that in the meantime you're also doing self-care and maintenance and planning for your own future. For when those kids go off to college, who are you going to be? What kind of life are you going to have? What plans do you have long term? What are you going to do? 60% marriage failure rate these days. So that is my speech about all that. I'm going to stop and shut up now. And just enjoy this life. It's the only one we know for sure we have. It's the only thing we're guaranteed to have is this existence. So don't waste it. And don't end up disappointed about it and look back, preferably with fewer regrets. That's all I got to say about that. So, yeah.